The timber prop didn't snap. It screamed. That was the first warning. Deep inside the belly of the Black Creek mine, sound travels faster than thought. Silas froze, his hand hovering over the leva of the continuous miner, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked back at the darkness where his son was loading the shuttle car. The air suddenly tasted diphrometallic, heavy and ancient. It wasn't the smell of methane. It was the smell of a mountain deciding it was tired of being hollowed out. In that split second, Silas realized the retirement party planned for Saturday wasn't going to happen. The alarm clock on the bedside table didn't buzz. It clicked, a singular, mechanical sound that seemed to sever the night from the morning. 3:30 a.m. To the rest of the world, this was the middle of the night, a time for deep dreaming and silence. But in McDowell County, West Virginia, this was the start of the day. Silas Thorne sat up in bed, his joints popping in a rhythm that mimicked the settling of a house foundation. At 58 years old, his body was a map of his profession. There was the scar on his left shoulder from a roof bolt in '92, the slight limp in his right leg from a slip on the belt line, and the deep, rattling cough that lived in his chest like an unwanted tenant. He moved through the house in the dark, knowing every creak of the floorboards by heart. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. His eyes were accustomed to the dark. He washed his face with cold water at the kitchen sink, the shock of it waking up his nervous system, preparing him for the descent. Martha was already in the kitchen, as she had been for 30 years. She didn't say much in the mornings. There was a silent language between coal wives and their husbands, a dialect of poured coffee and packed lunch pails. She handed him his thermos, steel and dented, filled with coffee black enough to float a horseshoe. "Be careful today," she said softly. It was the same thing she said every single morning, a prayer disguised as a command. Silas nodded, taking a sip of the scalding liquid. Today was different, though. Today, his youngest boy, Caleb, was riding the cage down with him. Caleb had been on the job for 6 months, green as grass, but eager to prove he was cut from the same cloth as his old man. Silas grabbed his hard hat from the hook by the door. The reflective stickers were worn, peeling at the edges, coated in a layer of grime that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. He stepped out onto the porch. The mountain air was crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth, a stark contrast to what awaited him 2 miles underground. The drive to the Black Creek portal was a caravan of headlights cutting through the pre-dawn mist. Pickup trucks, old and rusted, lined up on the gravel road. The banter in the bathhouse was loud, a necessary noise to drown out the anxiety that hummed in the back of every man's mind. Lockers slammed, boots were laced tight. Silas found Caleb sitting on a bench, struggling with the battery pack for his cap lamp. The boy looked too clean. His overalls were still stiff, blue, not yet stained the universal gray of the mine. Silas reached over and adjusted the strap on the boy's shoulder, tightening it with a practiced yank. "Keep it tight to your body, son," Silas rumbled, his voice gravelly from decades of inhaling dust. "Loose gear gets caught. Caught gear gets you killed. You listen to the machine today, not the men. The machine will tell you when the rock is angry." Caleb nodded, eyes wide, swallowing hard. They walked to the elevator cage together. The ride down was the true transition. It wasn't just a change in elevation. It was a change in atmospheric pressure, a change in reality. The sunlight disappeared, replaced by the artificial glow of cap lamps dancing on wet rock walls. The air grew cooler, then humid, thick with the smell of sulfur and wet coal. When the cage hit the bottom, the world narrowed. Here, the sky was made of slate and sandstone, hanging 4 feet above their heads. They boarded the Mantrip, a low-slung rail car that rattled and shook as it carried them deeper into the earth. They were heading to Section 4, the oldest part of the mine, still in operation. Section 4 was known as the Boneyard. The geology there was tricky sandstone channels that cut through the coal seam, making the roof unstable. It required extra bolting, extra care, and a patience the production managers hated, but old-timers knew was the only way to stay alive. Silas operated the continuous miner, a massive beast of a machine with a rotating drum of tungsten carbide teeth that chewed through the coal seam. It was loud, a roar that vibrated through your teeth and into your skull. But Silas could feel the machine. He operated it with the delicate touch of a surgeon. Hours passed in the rhythmic grind of production. Cut the coal, load the shuttle car, bolt the roof, hang the ventilation curtain. Repeat. The dust swirled in the beam of his cap lamp, a glittering fog that coated everything. Silas paused to wipe the sweat from his eyes, checking his methane monitor. He looked back to see Caleb wrestling with the heavy power cable, dragging it clear of the shuttle car's path. The boy was working hard, sweat streaking through the cold dust on his face. Silas felt a pang of pride, followed immediately by a pang of guilt. He hadn't wanted this life for Caleb. He wanted college. He wanted sunshine. "Break time!" The section foreman hollered over the roar of the fans. The men killed the machinery. The silence that rushed in was heavy, ringing in their ears. They sat on the floor, backs against the jagged ribs of coal, opening their lunch pails. Silas broke his sandwich in half, handing a piece to Caleb. "You're doing all right, kid," Silas said, chewing slowly. "Just watch your footing near the feeder." "It's slick today," Caleb smiled, teeth bright white in his blackened face. "I got it, Pop. I'm learning." "Learning is good," Silas grunted. "Surviving is better." He took a swig of water, his eyes scanning the roof above them. He didn't like the look of the strata in this cut. There was a kettle bottom, a fossilized tree stump, embedded in the roof right, near the face. They were unpredictable. "I think we need to put a few extra timbers under that kettle bottom before we cut any deeper," Silas told the foreman. The foreman, a younger man under pressure from corporate to hit tonnage numbers, frowned. "It's bolted, Silas. We're behind schedule. 2 more recruits. Then we timber." Silas stared at him. "The mountain doesn't care about your schedule, boss. That rock is heavy." The foreman waved him off. "Just cut, Silas." Silas tightened his jaw. He walked back to the machine, but his gut was twisting. He signaled Caleb to stay back, further back than usual. He fired up the continuous miner. The roar returned to drum spun. Silas engaged the hydraulic levers, inching the machine forward. The teeth bit into the coal. Dust flew. The machine shuddered, and then it happened. Not a noise, but a shift, a vibration that came from the floor, not the machine. Silas killed the power instantly. "Back up," he screamed, his voice tearing through his throat. "Everybody back!" The men froze for a fraction of a second, the instinct to freeze fighting the instinct to run. Then the roof groaned a long, mournful sound, like a ship breaking apart. The kettle bottom the foreman had ignored didn't just fall. It brought the whole immediate roof down with it. A slab of sandstone the size of a pickup truck slammed onto the canopy of the continuous miner. The impact threw Seleucidas, knocking the wind out of him. Dust billowed out, thick and choking, blinding everyone. "Caleb!" Silas roared, scrambling to his knees in the pitch black. His cap lamp had been knocked askew. He fumbled for it, beaming the light frantically through the wall of dust. "Caleb! Sound off! I'm here! I'm here!" A voice came from the darkness. Shaky but alive, the dust began to settle, revealing the devastation. The tunnel behind them, their exit route, was blocked. A massive collapse had sealed off the entry to Section 4. They were trapped on the wrong side of the fall. Silas checked himself, bruised, battered, but no broken bones. He crawled over the rubble toward the voice. He found Caleb huddled near the rib, coughing violently. "You hurt," Silas demanded, grabbing the boy's shoulders. Caleb shook his head, eyes wide with terror. "I don't think so. Dad, the way out, ... It's gone." The other men were shouting from the other side of the fall. Their voices sounded muffled, miles away. "Silas!" "Caleb, you boys alive in there?" It was the foreman. Panic edged his voice. "We're here." Silas yelled back. "We're okay. But the air? The vent bag is crushed." That was the immediate danger. Without the ventilation curtain pumping fresh air in, the methane that naturally seeped from the coal seam would build up, and the oxygen would run out. Silas looked at his multigas detector. The oxygen levels were steady for now, but the methane was slowly creeping up. "Listen to me," Silas said, grabbing Caleb's face with both hands, leaving black smudge marks on the boy's cheeks. "Panic kills faster than the rock. You breathe slow. You conserve your air. We are going to wait. They know we're here." They moved away from the fall, deeper into the dead-end cut, where the air was slightly clearer. They sat in the dark, turning their cap lamps to the lowest setting to save battery. The silence returned, but now it was hostile. Every drip of water sounded like a clock ticking down. Minutes turned into hours. They sat shoulder to shoulder. The cold of the mine began to seep into their bones. "I should have listened to you," Caleb whispered, his voice trembling. "I should have gone to trade school. I wanted the money. I wanted to help you and Mom." Silas put a heavy arm around his son. "Don't talk like that. You're here now. We deal with what is." He paused, looking at the jagged ceiling. "I started down here when I was 18. My daddy brought me down. He told me the coal puts food on the table, but it takes a piece of your soul for payment." "Is that why you're always so quiet at home?" Caleb asked. It was a question he had never dared to ask before. In the dark, the social barriers between father and son dissolved. "Maybe," Silas admitted. "It's hard to explain the dark to people who live in the light. It stays with you." Silas coughed, a deep, wet hacking that echoed in the small chamber. He checked the detector again. Methane was at 1.5%. Not explosive yet, but getting there. The air was getting heavy, stale. "Dad," Caleb said. "I'm scared." "I know," Silas said. "I am too." It was the first time Silas had ever admitted fear to his son. But fear keeps you sharp. If you weren't scared, you'd be stupid. Silas closed his eyes, his mind drifting to the world above. He thought of Martha. She would know. By now, the sirens would have sounded at the mine office. she would be standing at the chain-link fence, clutching her shawl, her face pale. The other wives would be gathering around her. The waiting was always harder for the ones above. Down here, you had a job to do. Survive. Up there, you were helpless. "Tell me about the fishing trip," Silas said suddenly. "The one we took when you were 10? To the New River." He needed to keep the boy's mind off the suffocating weight of the earth above them. Caleb took a shaky breath. "It rained," he said. "It rained all weekend." "It did," Silas chuckled softly, "and we stayed in that leaky tent anyway. We ate cold beans and played cards. And you let me win," Caleb said. "I didn't let you win," Silas lied. "You had a lucky streak." They talked, sharing memories like meager rations, keeping the darkness at bay with words. Suddenly, a sound: thump, thump, thump. Silas sat up straight, wincing as his stiff back protested. "Hush," he hissed. He pressed his ear against the coal rib. It was faint, rhythmic. It wasn't the mountain settling. It was mechanical. "The roof." "Bolter," Silas whispered. "They're drilling from the parallel entry. They're trying to punch a hole through to get us air." Hope, hot and fierce, surged through him. "Grab a rock," Silas ordered. "Bang on the roof bolts." Metal carries sound. Caleb grabbed a chunk of sandstone and began hammering on the steel plate of a roof bolt. Clang, clang, clang. They took turns, hammering until their arms burned, signaling their location to the rescue team on the other side of the wall. The thumping from the other side stopped. Then a new sound, the high-pitched whine of a drill bit eating through rock. It grew louder, closer. Dust began to puff out from a crack in the rib. Then, with a sudden punch, a drill steel broke through the wall, about waist-high. A rush of pressurized air hissed through the small hole. It wasn't enough to crawl through, but it was a lifeline. "We hear you," a voice shouted through the small borehole. "Hang tight! We're coming around the pillar. We're digging the fall out." Silas slumped back against the coal, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. They were going to make it, but as the adrenaline faded, the exhaustion hit him like a physical blow. His chest felt tight, tighter than usual. The stress had triggered something in his heart. He clutched his chest, gasping. "Dad!" Caleb scrambled over to him. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Just a winded." Silas wheezed. "Give me a minute." The pain was a vice, squeezing the life out of him. He looked at Caleb. The boy was safe. That was all that mattered. "Listen to me," Silas gasped, gripping Caleb's wrist with bruising force. "When we get out, you go back to school. You hear me? You don't come back down here. Not ever." Caleb was crying now, terrified. "Dad, don't talk like that. You're gonna be fine. Promise me." Silas barked, his voice losing strength. "Promise me, Caleb." "I promise," Caleb sobbed. "I promise, Dad." Silas nodded, his grip loosening. He leaned his head back against the cool coal. He could hear the heavy machinery working on the fall, the sound of rescue. The next hour was a blur of noise and light. The rescue team broke through the rubble. Men in orange suits swarmed in. They put an oxygen mask on Silas, loaded him onto a stretcher. He was conscious, but barely. He watched Caleb walking beside the stretcher, holding his hand. The ride out on the man-trip was slow. When the cage finally lifted them up the shaft, Silas felt the pressure change in his ears. The air grew lighter, and then the sunlight. It was blinding, painful and beautiful. They wheeled him across the gravel toward the waiting ambulance. He saw the crowd. He saw the weeping wives, and he saw Martha. She broke through the line, running to the stretcher. She didn't say a word. She just buried her face in his neck, sobbing. Silas reached up, his hands shaking, and touched her hair. He looked past her to Caleb, who was standing there, blinking in the sun, looking at the green trees as if he was seeing them for the first time. The boy looked older. The boy looked like he understood. 6 months later, the front porch swing creaked in the autumn breeze. Silas sat with a blanket over his legs, a cup of coffee in his hand. He wasn't moving fast these days. The doctor said his heart was stable, but his lungs were done. 40 years of coal dust had calcified inside him. He was retired, forced out by the mountain and his own body. A car pulled into the driveway. It was a small sedan, packed with boxers. Caleb stepped out. He wasn't wearing mining boots. He was wearing sneakers and a clean shirt. He walked up the steps. "All packed?" Silas asked. "Yeah," Caleb said. "Mom packed me enough food for a month." Caleb was heading to Morgantown, to the university. He was going to study geology. He wanted to understand the earth, not just break it. "You got gas money?" Silas asked, reaching for his wallet. "I'm good, Dad," Caleb said. He looked at his father, really looked at him. "I'm gonna miss this place." Silas looked out at the hills, rolling and green, hiding the dark tunnels beneath. "This place will always be here," Silas said. "You go make a life, son. A life in the light." Caleb hugged him, a fierce, tight embrace. Then he got in his car and drove away, down the winding road, leaving the shadow of the mountain behind him. Silas watched him go. He took a sip of coffee. The air smelled of burning leaves and coming winter. He took a deep breath, his lungs protesting slightly, but he didn't mind. It was the air of the world above. And for the first time in 40 years, he didn't have to go back down. The mine whistle blew in the distance, signaling the shift change. A new crew was going down. The cycle continued, but the Thorne line had ended its contract with the cold. Silas closed his eyes and listened to the wind in the trees, a sound much sweeter than the groan of a dying roof. He was tired, but he was at peace. The debt was paid.